Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Friday edition of Boilermaker Lounge. I am Sam Springer, as always, joined by the All-American Grant Flora, at least on the Boilermaker Lounge portion of the shows. Grant, how are we today?
We're doing good. Yeah, it's been kind of a long week. Just first week of the semester again, getting back into things, a lot going on, but it's been a good week, and here we are on Friday.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot to talk about. A Wednesday night's game, Purdue takes down Iowa 79-72. Grant, this was a game I've said it for multiple games, but this one was a really truthfully just an amazing game of two different halves for Purdue. The first half, Iowa shot almost 70% from threes, 50 close to 58% in the first half all around, and then we saw a second half where for the last I think it was 13 minutes of the game, Purdue missed one shot. So it was really actually a game of two games.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting for sure. Just like Iowa, I don't know, they came out red hot. Obviously, they had about four shots at least over the course of the game that should not have gone in that did, and
That was
like
four in the first half.
was it? Yeah, it
They were all
was,
four
and
threes. One was a bank, and three of them bounced and went up in the air and came back down.
yeah, and so like there was definitely a little of that, but it was also like they just figured some things out. They made their ancillary guys made open shots, and whenever a team has that, like they're just in really good shape. Produce the same way. Like when you have Harris, Cox, Meyer, all those type of guys making shots, then it elevates your offense. But I thought even defensively, Iowa played well. I thought Purdue was forced into a lot of like their secondary options. And then in the second half, they were able to convert on those. But like you weren't seeing a lot of the in rhythm stuff that you sometimes see from Purdue, like the easy Braden TKR pick and roll type stuff. They were kind of being forced into some other options, and they were able to make it happen in the second half. But Purdue's second half was really, really good on both ends of the court. They got the defensive intensity picked up. They outscored Iowa, what was it, by 16 points in the last 14 minutes or something like
Yeah.
that. So they really figured things out by the end, which was awesome to see.
Well, in the first half, you talked about Purdue. I posted a screenshot of the stats from the highlighted stats from the first half, and I said, if by looking at these numbers alone, you would think Iowa was up by a ton, but it's a 3-point game. Purdue shot 37.9% from the field. They were 4 of 10 from threes. So like they did not shoot a great percentage for that first half. Iowa shot 54.5% from the field in the first half, 7 of 10 from threes. But the fact was, Purdue out rebounded them by 4. They had like it just they forced 6 Iowa turnovers. They, like you said, they had the ancillary people that were contributing. Bennett Sturtz only had 5 points in the first half, and Combs had 10. Banks and Meniau had 5, 6, and 5 respectively. So like those were the people that you weren't expecting necessarily as much contribution from, and here they were leading the way for Iowa with Bennett Sturtz 2 of 5 from the field, 1 of 3 from threes. Just uh, wasn't really able to get the groove going because of CJ Cox and how he played in defensively that first half.
Yeah, like Purdue did a great job on Sturtz in the first half. Now I think, he picked up those 2 early fouls, went to the bench
Yep,
for a little bit, and then Iowa
helped a
brought
lot.
him back in. Purdue was focusing on him a lot. And that's why they probably had to bring him back in, because he didn't have any points when he went to the bench.
No,
And Iowa
no.
started struggling, though, even still when he left. And then he came back in because Purdue is putting a lot of emphasis on him, and rightfully so. But it shows like even those 5 points in the first half, while it doesn't look like he was doing a lot and he was struggling a little bit more than probably what he normally does, just the gravity that he has when he pulls in the defense was really helpful, because then those ancillary guys really struggled when he wasn't on the court. So, but then he figured out the scoring a little bit better in the second half, and that second half became more of like a duel between Braden Smith Bennett Sturt's kind of like people thought they were going to see. And that was a lot of fun, just to see two of the best point guards in the country going at it. And then in the second half, Purdue switched Braden on to Bennett Sturt's a lot more often.
Mm-hmm.
And so Braden was actually guarding him, and Braden did a pretty good job on him, especially considering he's giving up some height. So it was great. Obviously, we'll talk about this, but a great second half from Braden Smith.
Yeah, to go back to the first half for Purdue, and this was another part of the post with that screenshot was, you would have thought, with these stats and the fact that Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn combined for 2 points in this first half, that it would be a big blowout essentially. But you had Oscar Clough had 6 in that first half. Fletcher Lawyer, he only in that first half he was 2 of 5, only 2 of 5, but he hit a big 3. He had a couple of free throws. He got to the hoop and got a couple of hoops that, or a couple of free throw attempts, and then also a hoop that kind of kept it close. He helped pace it, but the big one for me was Daniel Jacobson. He came in, he only scored 5 points, but he had 7 rebounds and in 13 minutes because Trey Kaufman-Renn had some foul trouble. Oscar Clough, I believe, also had, yes, he had 2 personal fouls. So Jacobson had to come in and really contribute, and he did a great job off the bench.
Yeah, Jacobson was great. Even some of his rim protection and just his presence out there was amazing. So good to see him get back and make a pretty big impact, especially just with how good Oscar Clough has been. Like, Jacobson's minutes have been reduced in some of these games, so to come out and put in some good time was great. But then, like you said, Benter, Harris, Meyer, they all had their moments in this game. And so the bench came up really big. And that was what we didn't see. What was it, Penn State, where
yeah,
Purdue had 4 bench points, and it was primarily the starting 5 that carried
their
the
starters
load.
Scored 89 of the 93 points they scored. Yeah.
So a very different kind of script there, and that was really good to see. But yeah, I want to talk about this. I felt remember back after the Iowa State game when we were when Purdue's shots aren't falling and they're playing a pretty good team, how are they going to find ways to win games?
Yep.
I feel like this is a game that was kind of like that. Now that they got their shots to fall in the second half, but a lot of things weren't going their way, primarily in that first half, and they just kind of found a way to hang in there, play some good defense, rebound. The hustle, especially in the second half, kind of fueled the flame. Then they knocked down some shots to close out the game. But this was not their smoothest performance, but they still made it happen. And Iowa's a team, even though they were at home, Iowa's a team that can come in and cause some problems, especially with the explosivity of Bennett Sturts and when their other guys are knocking down shots like they were.
Yeah, and Braden Smith even talked about that. In fact, that he in the press conference, he said that after a terrible first half, he said it after a terrible first half, and he was even asked about it after that, but he said after a terrible first half, we had to come out and really make a statement and make sure. He said we have a good offense, so when we're not scoring, it's our fault. It's not that. Yes, defenses scheme well, they play well against us, but all in all, it's our issue that the offense isn't producing. And he said, I had a terrible first half, and I knew that when we started that second half, we had to put together a half that was more representative of what we could do offensively. And you know what? They did absolutely that. And then he was asked about the fact, you're only down 3 at the half. He says, yeah, but he says, I'm going to talk about myself personally. He says, I had 0 points. He said I had 4 turnovers. Now the official stats, he only had 2 actual turnovers, but he made it a caveat though. He said, I only turned the ball over 3 times, but I had a shot blocked, which I consider a turnover because we didn't get the ball back. He said, and I needed to do better. And oh my goodness, if you're taking it that personal that when the second half rolls around, you're able to do what you just did, my goodness, that's a dangerous ball player right there, because you know what? He had 4 assists. It just didn't seem like the Purdue offense was clicking like it should have. But like you said, they were able to play enough defense. They were enough to scrap and find it to keep close. And finally, But we'll get to the second half of what all took place in the second half. But finally, in that second half, they clicked.
Yeah, and that's what good teams and good players do is like they respond in those moments. They after they struggle in the first half, they come out, flip the script in the second half, and
Right.
they find the ways to win those games. And I think we've seen that from Purdue quite a bit, especially as of late. Like Penn State, like they just couldn't really create separation early on, and then they found a groove in the second half. Even though they only won by 8, they were up by more.
Right.
Really, it was a bigger win than an 8-point game. Washington was a little different because they got out to such a big lead, but like they've started to do that, especially after the Iowa State game, is really respond in some of those moments. So it makes you feel pretty confident about just the I don't know the DNA of this team and where they're at.
Yeah, and one last thing about that first half is you mentioned his name, but we didn't really talk about how big Jack Benter was in that first half. Again, TKR, Oscar Clough, both on the bench because of some foul trouble. So that meant Jacobson and Benter got extended minutes in that first half. And Benter only 2 of 5 from threes, but those 2 threes really absolutely it got the crowd back into it because Iowa was shooting out of their mind, playing very well offensively. That every time Purdue would do something, and you think, oh, maybe they could get something going, Iowa would come down and hit a shot. It just seemed like they were always extinguishing any little spark that Purdue was doing. But Benter was able to, I believe one of them tied the game and the other one maybe gave them a 1 or 2 point lead. But it just, you could see that was that's what they needed to keep the cohesion together so they didn't fall apart and just fall behind by so much in that first half.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was 23-18, and then Benter hit back to back and put them up by
Okay,
1.
maybe that's what it
like
was.
that.
That's what.
I
Okay,
could
yeah.
be wrong too. But either way, it was like that was a huge moment to kind of get Purdue back. It maybe not in control, but like it kept Iowa out of control or out of being in control of the game. So yeah, those were huge. I think you've seen him play with more confidence these last couple games, even though he's missed shots now since that streak.
And let's be honest, he's gonna miss shots, so that's I'm glad he didn't go, oh, I missed a shot, I can't shoot anymore.
Right. I think there were a couple of plays that he made because he was more confident that was like maybe they weren't likely to be fruitful. Like he had a drive, I think, where he kind of got blocked, and it was like, I don't think you were ever gonna get that one to go. Like the defender I think he had the size advantage, and it was like, I don't think you're ever gonna have a good chance of scoring that one. But like, I'd rather him do that, but then also have the confidence to take and knock down some big threes than to not do any of it. So overall, it's been great to see him do that.
Well, he only played 4 minutes in the second half because, when we get to the second half, TKR and Oscar Clough didn't have foul trouble anymore. And because, once you get into the second half, 2 fouls is not the end of the world. You just got to be careful. And they played a good second half when it comes to the foul part of it, and were able to play a bulk of their minutes. So Benter and Jacobson, who had double-digit minutes in the first half, only had 5 and 4. Jacobson and Benter combined, or total, in the second half. So not as present in the second half. But let's go to that second half. Purdue, they didn't start the second half off very well. They fell behind. Iowa hit a couple. It stayed hot. And were able to extend that lead out to 9 at one point, and you could feel. And Matt Painter does not normally. It's not part of his normal repertoire to call a timeout to end to break a flow, because he just feels that the team can work itself through it most of the time. He took a timeout. Like okay, we're going to talk about this, and it was at that point, that timeout, that the game changed.
Yeah, it was because I think they took the lead by 1, maybe 38-37 or 39-38. And then Iowa went on a run. It was 48-39. There were just some bad plays. Like Clough tried to pass it up top to TKR, and the defender was right there. It
Which
was
is
easy
what
as
gave
pick
the
6.
9-point lead, and there was some criticism about TKR not running him down. And yes, it looked bad aesthetically. The aesthetics looked bad, but TKR is not a sprinter. He's not going to run
Yeah,
that guy down.
and
There
he's
was no
not a
reason. And he had personal foul problems. Like at that point,
yeah,
he still had 2. You don't want him picking up a cheap third.
and he's not an esteemed shot blocker either. So
Correct.
like the chances of him making a play on the ball that didn't result in at least a foul, if not an and one, were pretty low. So I didn't have a problem with that at all. It was just I was like, that pass should never have been made.
Exactly. Yeah, the pass shouldn't have ever
Yeah,
happened. Yes.
especially in that context. So yeah, it was kind of scary, but then they responded really well out of that timeout. They knocked down some shots, and they started getting stops consistently. That was a huge
Yep.
thing up until that
Yep.
point, is they just couldn't really get a run going, because sure, they'd score 5 in a row, but then Iowa would find a way to get open for a shot, and they were hitting those open shots. And then some of those shots didn't fall for Iowa, but Purdue also picked up that defensive intensity. The crowd really got going, and it started to feel like a back and forth fight. There were moments in the broadcast where they were keeping track of how many shots were made in a row from both teams, and it was like 5 or 6, and then Iowa missed one, and Purdue kept scoring. So like, and Purdue ended up with 48 second half points,
Yes.
and yeah, they gave up 41, or no, they gave up 38, but then they were just the defensive intensity was there, and you saw between Matt Painter getting fired up and the crowd getting fired up, the guys, that was pretty incredible. And that's what you want to see again from kind of that defense feeding the offense.
I'm looking, and it was 38-38 with 16:46 remaining in the game. That was TKR hit a layup, or a layup to tie the game. Then Iowa went down, made free. I'm sorry. They took the lead 39-38 because that was the and one right before the under 16. Well, then Iowa went on a run. It was 39-38. Went on a huge run to make it. Finally, it was, let's see here, 48-39 at 14:36. So under 2 minutes or right around 2 minutes of game time, Iowa put 9 points on the board or extend the lead, a 10-0 run to make it a 9-point lead. And that's when Matt Painter took his timeout. And that's when Cox and Clough came out, Jacobson and Harris came in, and then all of a sudden Braden Smith took over. He hit two pull-ups, then got who was it? Jacobson got the lay-in. And was fouled, I believe, at the same time. No, just a lay-in. But it pulled it to within 3. And that's where it kind of that run, which pulled it close, at that point made me feel like it was like, okay, this is getting better now. Now Iowa responded and hit a layup to make it 50-45. But then after that, let's see here, Purdue tied it back up within a couple of minutes.
Yeah, and they kind of gained some momentum from that point on. But it was also kind of a faster pace. I felt like, I don't know what the data shows, but like it just felt like, they played some ball. Purdue went back on their run and got back into it. There was under 10 minutes to go, and then very quickly we were down to the final couple minutes, and it was like, next thing you know, this game was on ice, and Purdue got up by like 5 with under a minute to go, and it was basically over. And it was like, oh, that kind of came up quick. So I don't know if it was just that there weren't a lot of whistles and there weren't a lot of, stoppages for whatever reason, but yeah, and it was around the same time too, against like Washington and Wisconsin, when Purdue kind of let off the gas and struggled to close out the game.
That 8-minute mark or so.
Yeah. And now we've seen 2 straight games with Iowa, Penn State, where the opposites happened. It's been a closer game, but Purdue's been able to create some distance in the last 8 minutes. So that bodes well as well, because those last, a lot of people say that the last 5 minutes are like crunch time, or where the game can be won and lost. But the last 8, especially like those 3 minutes in between the 8 and 5 minute mark, kind of build up that momentum. And they're all pretty critical in close game situations.
Yeah, at 8 minutes 10 seconds, Bennett Sturts hit a three to put Iowa up 58-57. 30 seconds later, Braden Smith hit a shot, and then Iowa went back down. Combs hit a three. Then Purdue came back down, and Jakari Harris hit a three with 7 minutes left, and that was the last time Iowa. Oh no, Iowa tied it at 64 with 5:17 left. But that just shows, like you said, like that they didn't stop trying to perform. At 8 minutes, they realized, oh, we need to keep it going here. We need to keep pressing. And I believe they went through a stretch at that point to where they only missed one shot. They were 9 of their last 10, and that is huge and critical.
Yeah, and then it's a lot different the last 8 minutes when you're tied instead of up by 17. But like still, you got to be able to close out pretty much every game, and especially as we're going on the road now, out west to USC and UCLA, like you let any spark of something go for those home teams, and they're gonna get rolling a lot better than what a team would in Mackey. So, yeah, it's hopefully that road shock isn't a huge deal for them. They've done well on the road so far, but they just played 3 straight home games, and they got to go not just on the road, but out west to the coast.
Yeah.
But which I'm sure we'll get to. But like, yeah, it was great to see the end of that game. It was a little worrisome the first 25 minutes of the game, but they responded well, like good teams do.
Well, Purdue out-rebounded Iowa 26-23. Not a lot of rebounding, but when you have teams that are hitting shots, a lot of shots, and shooting at a high clip, you don't have those opportunities. So it makes sense that there weren't a ton of rebounds, but Purdue did win the rebound battle there. Bench points, 21 points to 10, 21-10. Purdue contributed, bench contributed 21. And we've talked about how the game's going to ebb and flow to where the bench is not going to contribute some games, and then they're going to be relied upon. And this was that game, when it came to it was nice that you could see it one game right after the other, like the bench non-existent against Penn State, critical in the game against Iowa. And that's what you like to see, because you know what, you want your starters are starters for a reason, so they're going to contribute most of your a majority of your points. But you want those games that if you need them, you've got the bench. And there was a string last year where the bench was non-existent for multiple games in a row, and there were multiple games in a row that Purdue needed them. I don't see that happening as much this season.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things is, especially when you have the star power that Purdue has, you don't want your bench guys or even your ancillary guys. Like you could throw Cox and Clough into that mix too if you wanted,
Yeah.
although Clough's kind of becoming more of a fourth star as opposed to one of those backup guys. But
Right.
My point is, you don't want those guys to be people you can shade off of and not worry about being threats. And obviously Cox and Clough have shown they are pretty big threats. But even the bench guys, like if Jakari Harris is open, you've got to expect him to knock down a shot. Same for Benter and Meyer. And then Jacobson, you want him to make his shots around the rim and be a rebounding threat as well. Like you don't want that intensity to drop off, and you don't want those guys to be people you can kind of lay off a little bit to throw more strength at the Stars. So yeah, I think they've done a great job over the course of the season. And it's good to see them respond after a kind of a subpar night against Penn State.
Yeah, and to kind of put a bow on this, we talked about the second half being a game of a different sort for Purdue. Talked about the first half was 36% or whatever. Purdue in the second half shot 72.7%. They only missed 6 shots, period, throughout the whole second half. They were 2 of 4 from threes, and their free throws, they shot 14 of 16, which is huge, especially in a game to where it a lot of the time it was a 1 possession game, if not maybe just slightly over a 2, like a 4-point lead. that's a 2-possession game, but 2 threes and you're down by 2. So I guess my big thing is when you're shooting free throws in a game like that, you have to hit them, and they did a pretty darn good job in that second half. They were 19 of 22 overall, which is really good at 86.4%. But like if you look at the breakdown, both teams shot 52.9% from the field. Both of them 27 of 51 from the field. So like that you don't see that very often where they shoot the exact same numbers period. But the big part is 13 points at the free throw line difference for Purdue over Iowa.
Yeah, and that can also be attributed to the possession game, like 13 turnovers to 9, I think is what it was total. Obviously they took the same number of shots, but Purdue got a lot more trips to the foul line, which will kind of tell you like they had more possessions, and it's because they took care of the ball better. Now, 9 turnovers is not bad. Usually I say keep it under 10, but like still could be better. They only had 3 against Penn State, but also forcing turnovers, especially in that first half. There were a lot of traveling violations, I think, on Iowa that
I think they had 4.
Yeah, something like that. And I thought they were somewhat forced by Purdue. Like the defense got them out of rhythm, and so they took a couple extra steps or something like that. So yeah, just really good job continuing to control that possession game, because we know it's been an issue in the past.
Yeah. So big win. Purdue improves to 6-0 in the Big Ten and 16-1 overall. They have won 8 in a row, so they've perfectly at this point, Grant, sandwiched that loss right in the middle of all their wins. And you can honestly say that was one bad half turned that game into a loss, and one terrible half, but still one bad half, and they're 16-1. But now, Grant, they travel west. They are in LA now. They will take on the USC Trojans tomorrow at 6 p.m. on Peacock as the road team for their first time out west in LA for the Big Ten. Grant, these 2 games are not going to be as easy as some would think. USC 14-3 overall, 3-3 in the Big Ten. Now they've struggled a little bit, but all of those games were on the road, I believe, and especially their 2 latest losses.
Yeah, the USC is definitely a team that could give Purdue some problems. And you look at their losses too. Like they lost at home to Washington. That one probably shouldn't have happened.
Correct.
But then they lost at Michigan and at Michigan State. Like you can't really knock them for those. Now they lost,
except for they got beat by 30 and 29.
Yeah, but like sometimes you just, when you're on the road and the good teams get some momentum, maybe they're just not a super mentally sound team at trying to keep attacking even when they're down. But like if they don't get down big in this game, even if they do, they're at home, like you can't really expect them to play that same way against Purdue, especially when they're looking for a marquee win like that to add to their resume. This is a great opportunity for USC. So definitely one where Purdue's going to have to be locked in and sound fundamentally to stay in control of this game and try and knock off a good USC team.
Yeah, and USC, they had some talk, after they'd lost Wesley Yates and Desmond Claude both to Washington. You kind of wondered, what was this team going to look like, and then they lose Rice later earlier. Is it Rodney Rice? I believe it is. Yeah. In Maui for the season, and he was averaging 20 points at that point. You kind of wondered what kind of team this USC team was going to be going forward, and they've turned out to be pretty good. And Baker Mazzara, is it Chad Baker Mazzara, I believe, is averaging 19.1 points. He looks like a pretty athletic player. He shoots 90.6% from the free throw line. That's ridiculous. But of course, I guess Fletcher Lawyer does too. But
yeah,
pretty good guard. That he's 6'7" though. He's a big 6'7". I had to make sure that wasn't a 1. A 6'7" guard. Is this a CJ Cox matchup, you think?
I would think so. It will be interesting though. in their last game, Maker Mazzara did not start, and I don't know if that was just their last game, but I think there've been some things going on. Let me look at the Minnesota game. He might not have started in that game either. They might have been bringing him off the bench. I'm not sure what the deal is. Okay, they did start him against Minnesota, but they didn't start him against in their last game.
Maryland.
Who was it? Maryland. Okay,
Maryland.
they didn't start him. He played like 9 minutes, had 7 points. So
Maybe he was
that
sick.
was maybe. I have no idea what the situation was there. I wouldn't expect that to be the case against Purdue. Like, they're going to need him to play heavy minutes and produce. But like, there's at least maybe something going on. But yeah, I would expect him to be at pretty good capacity and gonna cause some problems because, like you said, he's got size and he's a good shooter. So even putting Cox on him, he's gonna have to make up for those inches. And we've seen some of these bigger guard/wing players cause problems for Purdue. So that will certainly be a matchup to watch. But I would imagine you're right. CJ Cox will have that assignment.
He did not start due to a sore neck, which limited his playing time against Maryland. So that I would anticipate they probably looked at it and said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and keep you out and play you in some limited minutes just to keep you playing. But this isn't the game that we're worried about or that we need you at full, need you to play through injury or, some sort of hurt. Purdue's coming into town. We're gonna slow you down against Maryland, and then when Purdue gets into town, you're gonna be full force. I don't know that for sure. That's just my speculation as to, it makes sense. Maryland's not playing well right now. They're struggling. Period. When you get blown out by a team at home, and I say like IU, but I use up and down too when it comes to how they perform. And Maryland's just not good this season, so maybe you put that on the back burner. But yeah, these guys, they have let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys that average up in over 20. Oh, yeah, 6 guys, full force, I guess, maybe less. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do this counting. I guess Dickerson only has played in 8 games. I don't know if that's been recently or if he's hurt, but he's only played in 8 games. But they have a rotation, a heavy rotation of double-digit guys, minute guys, that it looks like they can keep some fresh bodies out there for Purdue to have to account for.
Yeah, I'm looking at those minutes too, and I think it's hard to tell with all the injuries that USC's had,
Right.
just who is actually playing legitimate minutes and not. But yeah, they do look like a deep team that has lots of guys that have good playing experience. We talked about Baker Mazzara, who's going to be an interesting matchup in the backcourt. They also have a pretty good front court. Like Ezra Osar is their, I think, 6'9" forward who averages 16 points a game. So he'll be a matchup for Trey Kaufman-Renn. And then I believe it's Kofi, who starts at the 5 for him. He averages 9.8 points, but he rebounds the basketball and is another 6'10" body that will be able to match up well. And so they kind of have the two big thing that can match up with TKR and Clough. So I obviously still believe Purdue has the advantage in the front court, but like, it's not going to be what it's been against like Wisconsin or even, some of these other teams like Penn State, where Purdue has the ability to dominate in the front court. It's going to be a matchup there. And then if Baker Mazzara makes things interesting in the backcourt, you got good matchups all around.
It seems to me, these guys, just looking at kind of what they've done and things like that, they kind of resemble a better version of Minnesota, maybe, to where they've got some size, they've got some athleticism, they've got some scorers that can put the ball in the hoop, but maybe at a little bit better of a clip. And I guess maybe that is telling that the third game of USC's trip out this way, was a 1-point win over Minnesota in Minnesota in overtime. But it is definitely, I mean, that's not to discount what I think about Minnesota or, try to pull down what USC is. Minnesota's not a terrible team. Are they a great team? No, they're not a great team. They're middle of the road good. So to say that they're a better version of Minnesota is saying that USC's pretty decent, and Purdue's not going to be able to just walk in and say, "Look at us, we're number 5. We're going to walk out of here with a win just that easy." It's not going to happen that easily. Purdue's got to put together a game plan that plays into what they do and still tries to, kind of pull USC into a game that they're not ready to play.
Yeah, they remind definitely. I can see the Minnesota comparison, also a little bit of Washington, like
I was going to
as
say
far as
Washington
being
as well.
injured, and Maker Mazzara is kind of like a Des Claude, and you've got
Yep.
some front court guys too. But yeah, it's definitely a game where if Purdue's not sharp, USC is going to catch them, and with Eric Musselman and the passion that he coaches with, and just the situation that USC finds them in, where they need a quality win. They kind of fumbled a couple early opportunities with Michigan State. Not that those were bad losses, just like they were opportunities they couldn't convert on. Now you get Purdue at home. They're going to be looking to make a statement and get back into the conversation of things. Mm-hmm. And it just feels like that perfect type of game. So Purdue has to be ready to kind of shut that down.
Well, and take a look at what USC did last year with Michigan State, who was coming in to the West Coast. They beat Michigan State at home. So it's definitely an advantage to having those big teams come to play them there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it probably starts with Baker Mazzara for Purdue. I think he has the ability, he has the explosive firepower as far as his scoring. He's probably the biggest matchup issue. So I think kind of the most likely route for USC to pull it off is Baker Mazzara scoring a lot of points and kind of drawing a lot of attention because of it. And then their front court kind of just holding steady with Purdue and just kind of keeping Purdue from dominating. I think if that happens, USC is going to be right there. And obviously, when you're right there and you're at home, when you're playing a team like Purdue, things can very easily go your way.
Well, you're going to have to do 2 of 3 things. You're going to have to pick 2 of these for USC. In my mind, you're going to have to either slow down Braden Smith's scoring and make him non-existent in the scoring category, slow him down in the assist category. Now, these are all easier said than done. Don't get me wrong. Slow him down in the assist category. So those are 2 things. And the third thing is out-rebound Purdue. That means you have to get a body on TKR and get to the loose balls, because you know what? TKR might not be scoring, but he's rebounding. And now in this last game against Iowa, he didn't rebound well. But he's still averaging close to 10 rebounds a game. He's going to hit those boards. He's going to at least keep the loose balls loose until Purdue can pull him in, which happened a few times against Iowa. So he didn't get the rebound, but he got the hockey style rebound. He was the second person. But I think 2 of those 3 things have to happen before sorry, got a coffee delivery. Before you're going to have 2 of those 3 things before I feel that USC can beat Purdue.
Yeah, and definitely it's going to come down to a lot of those controllable aspects of the game.
Right.
Ultimately, if USC's hitting shots and Purdue's not, it's going to help them out a lot. Vice versa, Purdue will be in really good shape if they're making shots and USC isn't. But the team that controls the glass, the team that controls the turnover game, and just makes life difficult for the other stars, USC's got to find a way to deal with Smith and TKR, and Fletch for that matter.
They've got a tall order too, just like Purdue does.
Yeah, and the way that Braden Smith is playing, I don't see him kind of just getting completely shut out of the game, especially when there really isn't a good point guard matchup for him from USC. Right. Maybe they'll throw Baker Mazzara on him just to put a bigger body. But then Fletcher Lawyer and CJ Cox have the ability to take advantage of their matchups. So that bodes well for Purdue, but it's going to come down to some of those kind of, I don't know, the gritty aspects of the game, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. This is definitely a game that I could see going either way, but 39-1, I obviously think Purdue's going to win because, 39-1 doesn't get there if when you've already got one loss. So, but no, I'm joking. Obviously, I could see a situation where Purdue could come out of Galen Center with a loss because USC isn't a pushover. They've got athletes. They've got the capabilities of taking down teams, and especially at home they do. So definitely 6 p.m. tomorrow evening on Peacock, Purdue goes into USC to take on the Trojans.
Yeah, it should be a fun one. It's gonna be a fun West Coast trip. I mean, Purdue at UCLA coming up too. That's gonna be interesting.
Historic
Atmosphere.
Pauley Pavilion.
Yeah, Purdue's never played there. I don't think. At least
I
Matt
don't believe
Painter's
so.
never been there.
I was going to say, and I don't recall in my lifetime Purdue ever going to Pauley Pavilion. So it's definitely and the fact that John Wooden played at Purdue and then built what Pauley Pavilion turned into, what UCLA turned into is it kind of that mystique and pageantry there. But the ultimate thing is those Boilermakers don't care where John Wooden went to school or where he coached. They've got a game to go play against the Bruins on Tuesday. So definitely a quick turnaround and a quick trip out west for the Boilermakers. And I was talking to Dustin post game after Iowa. My intrigue is not. Don't get me wrong. Want them to win both. If they come out 1-1, I'm not going to be terribly concerned necessarily. I want to see what happens coming back out of that West Coast trip, and that's a game at home against Illinois. So there's a lot to consider when this West Coast trip happens, and I'm interested in what's happening there, but I'm also waiting to see what happens when they come back as well.
Yeah, it's a great point because we remember what happened last year coming back from the West Coast trip was the home loss to Ohio State. So
in a game that they hold a 16-point lead.
Yeah, they gave up a huge lead, lost the game they shouldn't have. Now they're playing a good Big Ten opponent coming off that
Right.
trip. So obviously the West Coast games will be interesting because they're on the road and they're playing in a different time zone, but then coming back too, they'll have to be careful.
Yep. Well, like I said, 6 p.m. tomorrow against the Trojans on Peacock. The Boilermakers, I hope they wear their black script uniforms. And I'm still thinking they need to get a gold version of that because then they could have scripts in all three of the colors and be able to throw those out on occasion as well. But Purdue and USC tomorrow from Galen Center at 6 p.m. on Peacock. And that wraps up this Friday episode, Grant, of Boilermaker Lounge. Thanks so much for joining us. For the All-American Grant Flora, I'm Sam Sprunger. We will see you on Tuesday.